Eye-opener for September 2024. Since the release of the book, Solutions, Enough Complaining, Let's Fix America, the author has repeated the following sayings over and over again. Envy the dead, for they have not had to witness the heights preceding mankind's fall. And mankind will be the cause of 2 mass extinctions. All of the species we have obliterated, and all we will obliterate will be the 6th mass extinction, and we will be the 7th. And the plight you ignore could become your fate, but the most relevant one for the times in which we are living, however, has to be what's coming is coming. The only possible irrelevance in those words being that the what referenced is in fact already here. The author no longer believes we have time to fix, mitigate, or even avoid our shared plight. Instead, he now believes that the problems he once thought to have a high probability of occurring as inevitable. He believes the dystopian future he sought to avoid through his book is now our shared fate. This author, Chris Osman, no longer believes we can regain the freedoms so many of our servicemen and women fought for, in so many countries, over the many decades of war that have been thrust upon us and the citizens of foreign and sovereign nations. Wars and conflicts that were meant to provide security, freedom, and prosperity have done the exact opposite for most people living on planet Earth. While those things mentioned in the previous sentence were on the upswing for a while, they appear to be trending down. This truth is made apparent as citizens in most developed countries are surveilled by their own governments or some private corporation 24 hours a day. Don't believe me? Discuss some product or service out loud and just watch as ads promoting that product or service pop up the next time you're online. And speaking of consequences, there is no way you can feel more secure when refugees are replacing Americans. In the U.S., illegal, undocumented migrants receive more assistance than Americans. This is the result of American interference with our neighbors, as well as countries on the other side of the globe. While our leaders tell us that life is great, reality tells us otherwise. Whether they know that their actions are causing more harm than good, or they simply don't care, it matters little to those who suffer. The problem that arises when the masses choose to no longer follow their lead is that those leading don't want to relinquish their power. They realize the harm and torment they've inflicted as being something for which they will be punished. And though they may not feel responsible for the negative outcomes their actions have produced for so many, they fear that others will unjustly hold them accountable. It is this twisted sense of morality and justice that we must fear most. When a leader is backed into a corner and considers the worst-case scenarios of their impending downfall, they are likely to take more drastic measures to maintain power. Just think about the fact that every American president since World War II has committed war crimes, and wonder how different U.S. foreign policy might have been had they been prosecuted for starting wars that only Congress can legally declare. Imagine if all administrations and pundits were tied to war crimes or the promotion of them. Not just those who were accomplices, but those who were complicit. Just look at how many times the mainstream media got the story wrong and helped lead the country into an unjust, immoral, and illegal war. Had those who consumed stories from sources like CNN or MSNBC been more discerning and analytical, or if they looked back at how stories on Iraq, Saddam Hussein, and weapons of mass destruction were so obviously and seemingly wrong to fit the Bush administration's warmongering narrative, we might not have been in Iraq for 18-plus years, or Afghanistan for 20-plus years. Perhaps we could have avoided creating even more enemies had we voted Bush, and especially Dick Cheney, out of office, and we wouldn't have GW joking about not finding WMDs under his podium at a correspondence dinner. Imagine a world in which we can trust the news stories we read, watch, or listen to, in print, on TV, or on the radio. Imagine how science may have prevailed and how the oh-so-harmful lockdowns could have been avoided. Imagine leaders who can't simply say the economy is great, while the wealth and resources of the masses is diminished, locked up, and hoarded by the super-rich. An honest news industry would question such claims and provide an honest assessment of the economy. an assessment that would point out the fact that about 12% of Americans own 89% of all stocks, negating claims that of the stock market being an accurate indicator of a healthy economy. Imagine the retribution the public would seek against leaders who have lied, manipulated, and propagandized a nation to convince mothers and fathers to send their children to their deaths, or to relinquish their kids' future wealth to the rich. Now, imagine what the leaders facing such retribution would do to not only avoid losing power, but possibly their livelihoods and their lives. Anyone opposing them becomes their next target and must face attacks from an establishment controlled by morally bankrupt, corrupt people who have only ever exhibited the traits of a sociopath. This is to what the author's statement from the past 5 years is referring. What's coming is no longer approaching, but is already here. This is the what Mr. Osman believes our corrupt leaders will do to keep the rest of us from removing them from office, indicting, and holding them accountable for their crimes through incarceration, or worse. Think about what you would do to avoid the fate awaiting someone responsible for the deaths of hundreds to hundreds of thousands to millions of people. Think about what you would do if you had no morals and were only surrounded by people who were okay with your lack of morals. This is what Mr. Osman predicted in 2018, and look at where we are today. The Democrats have done everything to keep Trump from office, and someone even tried to kill the man. When he did none of the fascist things they predicted in his first term, why would anyone believe he would become a dictator in his second? And why would the Democratic Party put forth Harris as their champion? She's done the impossible in being less liked than Hillary Clinton. No one voted for her to be the Democratic nominee. So how is that democratic? Some small group of someone's picked her as their candidate and imposed her as your candidate. That is, if you're still a Democrat, of which Mr. Osman is no longer. America has lost its way, and the example it now sets for the rest of the world is how to destroy an empire.